To continue this discussion, where are there workplace exposures to crystalline silica? Well, solid dust particles generated from silica-containing materials come by way of handling, grinding, blasting, drilling, which as ironworkers, this is most commonly where we tend to be consistently exposed to it because we drill for wedge anchors, we drill for epoxy anchors, so that's very often where we as ironworkers are exposed to it. Crushing as well. Historically, sandblasting and mining and tunneling and granite cutting, sand casting, foundry operations are all industries or parts of industry where you can be very easily exposed to silica. I would caution you, lest you think that you are not being exposed to it regularly. If you're on a construction site and you have seen, as we all have seen in the past, dust generating operations, very often which are related to concrete. When I say that, what I mean is just the mixing of the concrete and hoppers with the big cloud, the cutting of block with a demo saw or with a big circular saw, even dry sweeping where there's no compound to keep the dust down, especially from those of us who were around a number of years ago where very often we would take a compressed air and we would blow off the slab or something like that. All of those operations are operations where you are being exposed to silica dust. How are you going to know that you may have been exposed? Well, just those incidences that I was outlining to you there a couple of minutes ago, they indicate probable use of silica or exposure to silica. If you look on certain products, check the product labels, check the safety data sheets. These are all places where you can gain information as to how much you are being exposed to silica by handling any particular material or being around. If you're a welder, then you are to some degree from time to time being exposed to silica. It could be even in a simpler thing as soapstone. Soapstone has silica in it. Slag from welding has silica in it. There's, of course, a number of other things. The paints that we use may very well have silica in them. So this is something that is, in many respects, all around us, and we have the potential for being exposed to it very consistently. So you should, for example, read the labels. A product that contains more than 0.1% crystalline silica by weight or volume has to say so. Very often the machines will have to have a label on them that indicate that silica is being used. Manufacturer's responsibility with regard to this is to attach a label to all products that contain more than 0.1 crystalline silica. The employer's responsibility, our responsibility as your employer, is to ensure that the label is not removed or defaced. Your responsibility is to read the label. So that's something that you ought to take upon yourself to do. Also, the safety data sheets, they contain data for materials or products containing hazardous chemicals. You have had some exposure to that through your training already. If a material or product contains more than 0.1% crystalline silica, then there has to be an SDS for that. Manufacturers and importers obtain or develop an SDS for each hazardous chemical they produce or import. As employers, we need to make sure that you have access to the SDSs for all hazardous chemicals in the workplace. Now, in our particular case, all of our foremen have on their telephone, they have on their tablet, in the app that we use for this purpose, they have a file or a folder which contains all of our SDSs. So this is something that's available to you at any time. We have it also available in the office. You can get this information. It's readily available to you. So this national emphasis program that we've been discussing applies to general industry and to construction work sites. The goals of it are to eliminate employee overexposure, to control health hazards associated with that overexposure. The features of it are it gives OSHA in procedures for inspections. Uh, However, having said that, realize that this only accounts for about 2% of the inspections. Also included, there is a mandatory follow-up follow-up inspections, if possible, where overexposures have occurred. What are they going to check for? If OSHA has an inspection, well, they're going to check for employee exposure monitoring, including collections of bulk samples. They're going to look for engineering and work practice controls, any kind of respiratory protection that's going on, hazard communication. They're going to look for all those things when they come to inspect. We're going to there is a formula available. You can look on www.osha.gov and you can find this for the OSHA permissible exposure level. There's a formula that gives you the exact information that you need if you want to take the time to do the math for that. When it comes, however, to crystalline silica permissible exposure levels, here's the bottom line message. Whether you work in general industry or whether you work in construction as we do, the more crystalline silica there is in the dust, the less of the dust you should breathe. We're going to call it to a halt right there. We're going to pick this subject up again in just a few moments.